I think it's quite interesting where we came from. Well, back in the early 2000s, I did my PhD on the armed conflict in Sierra Leone and post-war reconstruction. And as part of the disarmament program, well, part of post-war reconstruction, you have a disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration program for ex-combatants, ex-soldiers, ex-rebels. And as part of that, the ex-combatants get training. They got skills training, carpentry, bricklaying, tailoring, etc. And for the female combatants, soap making, and very kind of well, not very imaginative programs. And in the end, nearly all ex-combatants were not able to make a living with their newly acquired skills. But in a way, the one success story of kind of demobilization were these motorbike taxis. And it was actually not it was not a program of DDR. But a lot of ex-combatants were riding these motorbikes as taxis. And that's how I got interested in. And one of the first questions, of course, well, why are they kind of riding these motorbike taxis? And my argument was that, well, the owners of the motorbikes, they wanted these machines to make as much profit as quickly as possible. So they had the machines, the motorbikes, on the road for nearly 24 hours. So they had to be kind of team managed. So one rider, 8 hours, next rider, 8 hours, etc. But of course, if you're a little team managing or riding a motorbike, well, what you don't want is that one member kind of drives off with the bike to the next town, sells it, and kind of disappears. So you need to have trust among the little group of riders. And I think it was clear that these small platoons of ex-combatants who kind of survived the war together, fought in the front line or were in the jungle camps, there was this trust among each other. So they got involved in this business. And that's in a way how I got interested in this as well. In our project, we're looking at the impact of rural road construction on poverty alleviation. And since we're mainly focusing on Sierra Leone and Liberia, both kind of post-conflict countries, we do that also with an element of peace building to it. And it really starts from an observation that after the end of the civil wars in Sierra Leone and Liberia, a kind of revolution took place. Well, two actually. One is the mobile phone technology, which is really making a difference also in rural areas in Africa. And the other one is that after the wars, motorbike taxis suddenly appeared everywhere. First, of course, in the urban areas, and then later they spread out to the rural areas as well. And they really make a difference. Communities that before were hardly ever reached by mechanized transport now have these motorbike taxis visiting them and trafficking passengers and goods, etc. But the observation was that although this was a really spontaneous process, which I think is nice, both the international donor community and the national governments were not really prepared to do anything to further facilitate this. So millions and millions or tens of millions are kind of pumped into infrastructure, road infrastructure, reconstruction and development. But this is all quite conventional. So building wide paved roads connecting towns, and then sometimes they build smaller roads, feeder roads, but still they are quite kind of wide, and the bridges and the culverts are all for kind of calculated for heavy transport. While, of course, what you see is the overwhelming majority of transport now takes place by these small motorbikes. So our idea was to see if you go further down, below the feeder roads, which still cost like $50,000 per kilometer, which is quite a significant amount. Is there something that you can build that kind of is tailored more to well, the transport that is all around you, but doesn't cost that much. So that's where we came up with the idea of kind of upgrading footpaths, which are already there from the villages to the main road or from the villages to a local town. Upgrade these footpaths in such a way that they are kind of, that they can navigate it by these motorbikes. So putting in place proper locally made bridges, making sure that even during the rain season they can still be accessed. And the good thing about these footpaths is that they are upgraded footpaths to tracks, is that they're much cheaper, of course. They come at like $3,000 to $5,000 per kilometers. And to make these tracks, you can use local labor, you can use local materials. So a lot of the money you spend on this will stay kind of in the villages. To convince donors to kind of maybe change or partly change their rather kind of conservative strategy of road construction, you need proper data. In the end, it's data, it's evidence that can convince them to maybe adapt their strategy. And there was no data about this, so that is where our project comes in. We're just starting, but in the end we hope, of course we are not biased, but we hope that, that the data shows that building or upgrading footpaths to tracks that can be accessed by motorbikes or by bikes or of course by people by foot will make a difference to isolated communities. Both an economic difference, so farmers have better access to markets, but also access to education, access to health. Of course, Sierra Leone and Liberia are recovering from the Ebola epidemic. And one of the big problems during the epidemic was the very difficult access that health teams had to communities. So we think it will have quite an impact, but the key question, of course, is, well, what is that impact exactly? And will be enough to convince donors and national governments to kind of change their strategy a little bit. So that's what the research is about. And we're working with a number of institutions, kind of my university, Swansea University, Wageningen University in the Netherlands, Agriculture University. We're working with Liberian partners, with a university in Sierra Leone, but also with Cardno, which is a for-profit business kind of involved in all over the world in infrastructure. And they are kind of, I think they just won a new kind of multi-year program to look after road rehabilitation. But they are really interested in this as well. And I think when we talk about kind of impacts, I think it's really important to have these, well, commercial players on board as well. I mean, as an academic, yeah, when we think about impact, we think about academic papers or papers we publish in journals. But to have a kind of industry partner on board, I think really kind of opens up a whole new kind of set of agencies or actors that we can reach. So I think that will hopefully make a difference as well. So.